Leaders in education going to the polls. NEMA getting ready for the hurricane season. And residents of Marco City getting prepared for the business sector.
The Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I'm Shashina Roparkis, and as always, it is so great to have you with us. Topping news this evening, members of the Bahamas Educators Management Union voting today here on Grand Bahama. The voting process taking place at the C.A. Smith building was supervised by the Labor Department. Megan Shepard has our top story.
Members of the Bahamas Educators Managerial Union heading to the polls Friday morning to elect a slate of officers to represent them for the next 3 years. This union represents administration as well as those that have worked within the schools and now work in the offices of the Ministry of Education. Representative of the Department of Labor, Juan Bullard, overseeing the process. He notes that members will be voting for a total of 7 positions. However, 4 persons will be going in unopposed.
Today, persons were still coming out to vote for positions such as the area vice president, the treasurer, and the executive vice president. However, because of a recent ruling about 2 or 3 years ago, even though those persons who would have been elected unopposed, the law clearly states that they should still be voted for on the date of election.
The candidates vying for the area vice president position are Fraser Gibson, Keith Barr, Kendris Heald, and incumbent Tammy Ellis. BAMU members Yvonne Ward and Mary Russell taking part in the voting process. They share what they expect from the new slate of officers.
There are some things on the drawing board for our medical and a sight, vision, and also dental. Those are some of the things that we've been fighting for to try to get in our BAMU agreement. And so I think, like I said, the biggest thing I think is communication, lack of communication, not knowing what's happening with the union, and not having the regular meetings that we should be having.
We're looking for representation and fairness across the board. That is what we're looking for. And so this morning I came out to cast my ballot. I feel as if it's a real election. Okay, and like I forestated, whatever the challenges are, who knows, one of these days they may have to represent me, and I am looking for fairness.
Stephen McPhee was elected president of the Bahamas Educators Managerial Union. Megan Shepard, ZNS Network News.
In other news, the National Emergency Management Agency wrapping up a week-long workshop of disaster management here on Grand Bahama. As Jamila Mizik reports, scores of residents are now certified in the field of risk management.
The National Emergency Management Agency wrapped up its week of disaster risk management training for instructors in the northern region. NEMA Supplies Officer and Certified Training Instructor Tammy Mitchell says it was an exciting week and participants now have an idea of what it takes to be an instructor. Participants had the opportunity to present their topic of choice, and she says if all goes well, they will receive their certification.
It gave them an exact insight as to from budgeting, preparing your lessons, learning how to present the information in class. They also learned how to set up the class. They had to learn about visual aids. They had to learn about the use of equipment, from audio and visual equipment, and they also learn how to work as teams, because you can't do everything alone. So they all taken their experiences, and now they would have had to give us their lesson plan and then present that information step by step, almost like telling a story, step by step on that lesson plan that they would have presented to us. And then at the end of it, we will give them the critique, and then hopefully they would have all, and they would have all passed the class.
Mitchell says NEMA also hosted the same workshop a week earlier in Bimini. She says there were 8 participants and the training was a success.
They went through everything. They went through learning initial damage, which means knowing how to rapidly collect the information that the country would need so that assistance can come as quick as possible. Then they also learn about shelter management. Now, Bimini only has about 5 shelters, but now the ladies who actually did the training, there was 2 gentlemen actually, the ladies who did the training last week, they all are now aware of what exactly needs to happen once it is deemed that the shelter has to be open.
Workshop participants say the seminar was very interesting, comprehensive, and quite fulfilling. They shared what they learned and what they would be presenting about.
One of the key things I'm dealing with is, apart from disaster management, is to be able to talk about budgeting. I see that that's very important because we are living in a time where the economy has been having several challenges. So it plays a major role as it relates to preparing persons to become financially prepared, to be able to secure themselves, as it relates to not only dealing with disasters, but preparing yourself for the future.
Is to explain the importance of accurately filling out any application form, any information that one has to do in terms of disaster preparedness or information, any disaster in your island.
Another participant, Marjorie Darville, is encouraging others to receive the same training as she believes it is important.
Well, there's always an awareness that we should have here in the Bahamas in regards, especially when it comes to disaster. And so the more people that are knowledgeable on how to go about, really letting people know about preparedness, courses like this are really, really helpful.
Jamila Mizik, ZNS Network News.
Switching gears now, the government has promised to enact a Freedom of Information Act. While some steps have been taken towards this becoming a reality, a local tech expert shares why this probably won't come to fruition anytime soon. The call continues for the government to enact a Freedom of Information Act that will grant the public a general right of access to records held by a public authority, subject to certain exemptions. When the act is fully enforced, every Bahamian citizen, permanent resident, and registered company in the Bahamas will have a right to obtain access to a record other than any exempt record. C. Alan Johnson says there has been many promises to fully enact this Freedom of Information Act. However, that is yet to happen.
We have conversation about freedom of information, but you cannot have freedom of information without first digitizing the entire governmental department. You can't have freedom of information without going to the archives and file and digging it up in boxes and information. So there has to be a digitization project for the entire government ministry. The Freedom of Information Act itself must reflect the digital reality of today's environment, something that we're not having a conversation on. We've been promised a Freedom of Information Act by subsequent governments.
No FOIA has ever been fully enacted in the Bahamas. However, a revamped version was passed under the Christie administration in February 2017. In 2018, the Bahamas moved one step closer as the government announced that corporations and agencies will have to go through extensive training that is set to cost around $1 million before the act is fully implemented. The trainings began that year. It was also reported that the act will go into effect in phases in the Bahamas in order to ensure that all the preparatory work and training that is necessary to fully implement the regime are in place. Johnson shares why the FOIA is important.
A lot of people make focus on what government is spending, what government is doing. Freedom of information is absolute access in totality to governance, and that is where we have not moved anywhere towards that. We keep focusing on an accountability aspect of governance as opposed to the fullness of what freedom of information is.
He says this government has promised transparency and accountability, and he believes that this starts with the Freedom of Information Act.
Freedom of information creates the environment where it brings accountability. Information becomes a powerful source of being able to make a determination as to the direction government is doing. You can see irregularities in what has been said and what has been done. You'll even notice things out of place that is contrary to the information that has been said to be done. You will see where freedom of information, where a contract is given to do a particular thing, and you can look at it and say, no, these are not being fulfilled. So it's an integral part of integrity. It's an integral part of transparency and accountability.
Also in news this evening, a 7-week program wrapping up in Marco City. The initiative was held to prepare residents to start a business of their own. This past Saturday, participants took part in an award ceremony at the Pelican Bay Resort. Member of Parliament Michael Pintard says during the sessions, participants were also exposed to professionals in their field of choice.
$5,000 go to the successful business plan winner, and what they would have done in the final stage was to make a pitch of their business idea, and the adjudicators then determined which would have been the most successful business plan plus pitch. We're also going to link them with a business mentor who will guide them so that they can be successful. We then refer them to other possible funding sources. So last year's winner went on to compete in the island-wide competition that was run by the Office of the Prime Minister, Senator Thompson, and myself.
Michael Johnson was selected as the winner. Nonetheless, Director of the Small Business Program, Yvette O'Connell, says there were a lot of unique ideas.
There was a young lady that she grows mushrooms, and I thought that her product was excellent as well. And so we see young people engaging in things that people thought were like taboo, and they are stuff that other people would say, no, that's not a career that I want to go into. But almost every business that came forward were businesses that were things that we need here in our country, and all of them were businesses that were sustainable.
In news from the crime beat, police taking Baz Lane resident Kevin Mackey before the court today to be charged with 1 count of armed robbery. Mackey is accused of an armed robbery that occurred in Pine Airs Loop last Thursday. He was not required to enter a plea and remanded in custody until June of this year. You're watching the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Stay with us. There's more news when we come back.